Welcome to the Callis Mindset, the show where discipline meets growth and high performance becomes a way of life. I'm your host, Kannon Callis. Each episode, we sit down with high performers, top real estate professionals, and everyday people and leaders who refuse to settle for average. Today on the podcast, we have Garry Marshall. I met Garry at a Hubble Homes event last year. We've been planning this, and I'm really excited to share his story with you. There was a time in Garry's life where he felt like he was almost out of options. Literally almost homeless. Someone special gave him an opportunity to help him recover and rebuild his life from a very low point. And that's the story we're going to share today. Someone that knows what it's like to have nothing left to lose, knows what it's like to gain opportunity and to pursue it. And it gives discipline a different meaning. Garry, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thank you, Kannon. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really excited to be here on the Callis Mindset.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time as well and being here. Well, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing, I want to jump right into it. What does Callis Mindset mean to you?
To me, the Callis Mindset is going to be based on adaptability. I think life has all kinds of different changes, and success is always changing, right? So you may achieve something, and then once you achieve that, you're going to have to adapt to find another success of the newer version of you. So I think you're always going to be growing and always learning new and potentially better things for yourself, what will develop into, a stronger version of you.
Yeah, that's a cool way to put it. I like that definition. Well, thanks for sharing. Which kind of reminds me of your story. A lot of things that you've been through and the versatility you faced has been focused around adaptation and just becoming that next level you yourself.
Mhm.
So I wanted to kind of look back and reflect on your early life. Can you tell me, tell me with your story?
Yeah, I still believe that I was blessed, especially for, the circumstances. I was able to, adapt and overcome a lot of things. In my youth, I did have a struggling upbringing. And it was just because there was a lot of mental health factors going on through my family at that time. And it was really hard, actually. When you're in a younger state like that, you look up to your parents, you also look up to your siblings and things. And well, my family was unfortunately kind of in a toxicity situation, and it forced me to, kind of go on my own at a very young age. And during that time, it was very scary because I saw what was happening with my family, and it's nothing against them. I mean, we all have our own battles we have to fight, right? And I knew if I stayed there, that I was going to be almost guaranteed to follow down that same pathway. And so I saw that there was a guaranteed failure, but there was an uncertainty of if I were to branch out and move out on my own. And I would rather take the uncertainty than the guaranteed failure.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And so you had an unstable environment, and it was almost like a risk you were forced to take just because you were pushed into independence to find a better way forward or to find a different way at least. And you from a young age, it sounds like that shaped kind of your personality. And you've been in sales and you've been in real estate and insurance and a few different industries where it does take kind of high risk type of people to succeed or to hit that. So tell me more about how that young age shaped who you became in the future all the way up to about 2018. Let's talk about that year.
Yeah. So in my youth, it was, you know, I had a single mother. My mom was a single mother with two boys, and she was, working really hard to take care of both of us to put a roof over our heads. So I very am grateful for what she did, but it just left a lot of rooms for, bad things to happen. And, so I got out of that environment, and, I was actually 17 and a half when I graduated from an alternative school, and I actually really struggled with high school. I didn't learn how to read until I was 15. I had to have tutors. I had to do like days, or I had to do regular school, night school. I had to do 0 hour weekend school. I had to give up my summers to catch up with my class. And I even had teachers who doubted that I would be able to do those things. And so it was constantly a battle of, people not actually believing in me. And not only was it, my some of my teachers, but uh, even family members, things of that nature, didn't think I would be able to accomplish those things. And for me, it was more of like I have to do this. This is gonna, I don't want to follow this same pathway as my family and my, colleague or my siblings. So I chose to, I doubled down. I took the risk. I did everything I could to, I took those extra classes. I got those tutors. And thankfully, I did have parts of my family who did jump in to help me get above that. And then, yeah, I was moved out and on my own, 17 and a half. I moved to Boise. I managed to get a trailer on the bench for like, it's crazy to think now, but like for like $400 a month. I was paying $400 for this trailer. And, I was living in Boise. I got my first job, selling like bones. I got a job at Cricket, and I started working my way up from Cricket to, mattresses to furniture, and then I got all the way up to cars. And fast forwarding to, like 2018, uh when I got, to the point of selling cars and everything of that nature, I was actually down on my luck. I got out of the car business and I was actually working at a grocery store because I needed stability. I was very active, and like I dislocated my shoulder snowboarding and then dirt biking and a whole bunch of other things. And well, I was young and kind of dumb and thought I was invincible. And I was like, I'll just fix it later. And 4 years later of having dislocations, it got pretty severe to the point where, I couldn't even pick up a gallon of milk. And so,
Mm.
or it would dislocate. So I was at a predicament where I was in an apartment. I was still in the lifestyle of paycheck to paycheck kind of situation. So I didn't really have a lot of savings. And, I did get benefits from the grocery store I was working at. Well, they're really good benefits, thankfully. But they would only cover, like 60%, 70% of my wages while I was on disability. And I was skimming by my chinny chin chin with like rent and utilities and all that. So if I got the surgery, it put me in a predicament where I would be on the verge of homelessness. I would be, thankfully I would have my problem fixed, but then I had a whole new problem of being homeless and I didn't know where that went. But it was great because I kind of already had that experience. I had the experience of guaranteed failure, that I would continue to have that problem, or I could go after the uncertainty and see what it would bring. And so, yeah, I pulled the trigger and I got the surgery, and I was like, if I become homeless, then I'll be in a homeless shelter regardless. I'll figure it out from there. And when I, decided to make that, I guess my best friend at the time told his family what I was going through. And they heard that story and they invited me over to get to know me and, for dinner. And I still struggle with having words to thank them for what they did, but they housed me when I had the surgery. They gave me an opportunity where, I had nothing to give in return. They let me stay there for 6 months of my recovery to the point where, I could be on my own and do my physical therapy without, being in a sling and everything. So I'm forever in debt and grateful for those people and how they did that for me. So I was at the car lot because I was finally on my own. I had my own apartment at this point, and this is where real estate like bloomed into my life is when I was at that car dealership, I got a phone call from my best friend's dad. And he called me and he said, "Man, if you can sell cars and go through that process and be successful at selling cars, you can sell homes." And that even become I saw him, I saw his magnificent home and all these things that he had, and I was very grateful to be a guest there, but I never even thought that this man would even put a spotlight on me or give me an opportunity to even work with him. And he said that he would work with me to get my license and go out of his way. So I was mind blown. I was terrified. I was absolutely everything in my mind was racing, like telling myself, I've never done anything like this. Like, I think this is going to be out of my league, but there was no way I was going to turn down this opportunity. So I just instantly said, absolutely, I'll do what I need to do. And so when I was at that point of getting licensed, I had to go, he gave me there's a couple ways you can get your license. You can study for like 6 months, or there's the fast track of doing it in like a month, in like 2 to 3 weeks. And so we did the 2 to 3 weeks because he wanted me licensed as soon as possible. And oh man, like especially with my struggles of going through high school and all those things, it's kind of resurfaced with me again, thinking like, oh man, like, am I cut out for this? Can I do this? Learning about real estate. That exam was atrocious to me. It was so hard. I failed it 3 times, and so each time I failed it, it kind of crushed me a little bit, because it wasn't just me that was failing at this time. I had someone who believed in me, so I felt like I was letting the opportunity that finally shown up for me to become something more. I was letting them down, and so I just couldn't let that happen. I was like, I can't let this slip by, and after the second time of failing, I was on the verge of I mean, I was on tears. I was like, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna make this right. And yeah, I was there studying day in, day out. All I did was live, sleep, breathe real estate until that third time, that lady gave me the paper. It was all folded and she handed it to me smiling and she said I passed. And I just like, it was, something changed. Something changed in my head where I was like, it wasn't like relief. I mean, it was more of a pride thing, because I knew I put so much into it and I did everything regardless of like my doubts, and like they kind of crept, but I knew there was a huge opportunity here, so I couldn't let it go away. And yeah, I felt very prideful of like all the work finally paid off, that I got it. But then I knew it was just the beginning, because now I'm just licensed. I've never sold a home. I've never done it. Now I got to build this, legacy, or this character of knowing that I can sell homes. I've sold cars and stuff, but when I got to the builders corporation where he gave me the shot, I asked them if I could be paired with the top producer, because I figured if I was around the best person at that establishment, then I could watch how they became or how they developed that. And so that was the huge changing point for me, is watching how she ran everything. And I had to make her know that I was serious. So she would be grinding till like midnight some nights, and she would tell me to go at like 9. She's like, "Oh, you can go." And I was like, "Well, when are you going?" And she kind of sat there puzzled. And she's like, "Well, I got contracts I got to finish, so don't worry about me. I can get them done." I was like, "Well, let me help you with those contracts. That's why I'm here." Because I felt like if I were to left, then I would just be some other person, just trying to do the 9 to 5 and just skim by. But I needed to be successful at this, because the person who gave me a shot was like above me too. So I didn't want to fail them. I didn't want to let them down.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for sharing.
yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And I was with that builder for about 3 years, 2.5, and I hit the gauntlet twice. I got bronze and then I got silver. And my first one was like 4.1 million or 4.1 million sold. And then my second was like 6.7.
Nice.
So
That's awesome. Well, yeah, congrats. And then yeah, it sounds like, so to go back a couple topics ago,
yeah.
you had gone from low ticket sales to mid ticket sales and continuously increased your product of what you were selling from, like phones, mattresses, cars, real estate. As you progressed in your sales career, you leveled up into higher level ticket items, and then ultimately working for a builder here in Idaho, and then hitting those recognition tiers for sales. That's awesome. So I think a lot of that has to do with you being open and being kind of strategic about where you're taking your opportunities, but also a lot of it has to do with the grace of God. I think just because of the opportunities that were presented in a time of need when you were still developing who you are. The gentleman in the family that kind of took you in and helped you recover. I mean, that's something that, in my opinion, money just can't buy. That's like, it doesn't. It's like a blessing. It's like one of those situations where it sets you up long term, not
hmm
just, hey, here's $10,000, good luck, or something like that. It's like they actually tried, and then the fact that he was in a position that he needed to be in to open the door for you, you were in the right place at the right time. And
Absolutely.
that's where opportunity truly converts into, where potential becomes reality, is that open-mindedness, the direction you want to go, and when the opportunity presents itself, you take it. And
hmm
that's what the Callis mindset's about. It's what, when you're at a low or a high, it doesn't matter where you are, being able to be present and identify those opportunities, and just take them and see where they go. And so you wrote it all the way up to at the top of sales for the company you were working for. What happened after that?
So when I, got to the point where the money was coming in, the status was there, people like respected me at, the company, and it felt really good. I felt like I was getting to the point where I was being fully successful, because in my life or my upbringing, I didn't have money. Like we didn't have a lot of money, so we were always skimming by. And so now I was getting paychecks that I couldn't even fathom when just like even that year late before, I couldn't fathom like, a $14,000 check. I've never seen a check like that. And that just like my jaw dropped. And so when I was doing that, I kind of just kept going and going. And I was like, I need to do more. I need to get better. And that's good. I think that is very important. But I actually got so involved in real estate that I forgot who I was. And I had a pretty tough reality when it hit, because I was over at a bonfire with my best friend, and we were just sitting by the fire having a drink, and I was telling him about my work, oh, I just got off work, and I'm doing all these deals, and I was just telling him all this, and he was there, he was patient, he paused, he let me finish, and he's like, "Hey Gary, like, with all due respect, can we not talk about real estate? Can we talk about something else?" And I sat there, and then I paused because I couldn't think of anything else. I literally couldn't think of a topic to talk about because that's all I did. Literally, I would wake up, I'd be the first one in, the last one out, and all I was doing was sales and like, you know, the process of real estate, like talking to title, talking to escrow, talking to, you know, inspectors, all that. And so I had like an identity crisis at that moment because my job became my identity. I wasn't really anything but a salesman for that corporation. That's all I could be. And so having all the money, having all the things I desired, what I thought was successful at the moment, I've never felt so empty in my life. All my connections were fading. Like when I was dirt poor and I was like literally on the streets almost, I still was extremely happy because I had people who relate, like people who were there, people who would hand out, a hand when they could. And I was always still in connection with people. But when I was at that point of, uh, my real estate career, I kind of let those all go away. I thought like that where I was going in the corporate life was me. And once that question was dropped by my really good friend, it made me have a reality check. And at that point, uh, I don't know how many listeners have worked for a builder or not, but builders, your homes don't they're not instantly built. They take a while to close. If they're already built, you can close in like 30 days. But if it's a plot of land and then they're building on that, that could be 6 months. And you can still sell the deal and still get that, but like you don't get paid until they get the keys to their home and they go and they close on the home. So I had multiple deals like in the pipeline where I had about approximately $70,000 in the pipeline. And if I were to quit, I would lose it. And so I was really in a fork of the road of like, do I just ignore the person I'm becoming and the relationships that are fading away and continue to chase after this money? Or do I try to find out who I really am and what I stand for and what gives me that fulfillment? Because I was very proud of myself of achieving, all that money and all those things because I never had that. But once I had it, I realized that that wasn't success for me. And that's where I kind of come back to your first question when you asked what the Callis mindset is. And the reason I say adaptability is because I literally had to change myself again after technically being extremely successful. So I had to adapt to like, well, that's not everything. So
Yeah.
that's and that made me really appreciate who I've become and the paths I've taken.
Yeah, and you probably heard the saying that the goalposts change or the finish line moves. Once you achieve a goal, it always becomes a different goal or a higher goal. But when you have to completely reinvent yourself because you realize that the vehicle you're in is the wrong one,
Mhm.
that's a different challenge altogether. And so I wanted to ask you how is life today? Where are you at? And how are things going?
Life is amazing. I'm in a very great relationship right now, and career-wise, I found a new opportunity for me. I work for a pest control company that does a door-to-door program. Uh, I actually talked to my boss, and he was super cool with me mentioning it. It's Aimvo. We're actually a local company here in Blackfoot, Idaho. And so, yeah, it's changed my life. The reason why is, sure, I'm not making as much money as I was in real estate, but what makes me really value this job is that I work really hard for 4.5 months and I get to help grow my youth. Like, so I kind of target people who are like 18 to 30 and I teach them negotiations, I teach them sales, I teach them those kind of skills that they'll take for the rest of their lives and help them kind of grow into what they want to be. But then once the summer is over and we come back home, we have 7 months to do whatever we want, and we can make close to a year's salary during those 4.5 months. It's really about your commitment. Being able to have that freedom has let me do public speaking. It's let me get my story out. It's let me have the time to really assess who I wanted to be. And this might be a little heavy, but I had the passing of my mother actually last year. And during that time, I was the only person alive, like the only last hair. So I had to do all the final expenses. I had to do all the, paperwork and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff was super heavy.
Yeah.
But the fact that I had the freedom to not worry about work for like that 7 months really let me be able to take aside what I wanted to do and how to go about it. So I was very thankful for that.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've done a lot of reflection and introspection to identify and find what is the new definition of success mean now that you have hit the ceiling in a different definition and you realized it wasn't as fulfilling as mentoring and coaching other people, having the opportunity to tell your story, and at the same time making an income to survive in an industry that you probably didn't realize you're going to go into, but it's still utilizing the same mindset and the same skills that you've adapted into over
Hmm.
these years. So that's a great way to share your story. And I wanted to go back to some of the core lessons that we've discussed on this podcast.
Sure.
Number one being adaptability to face things head on and when they happen. And I know that a lot of a lot of people I know, including myself, sometimes we will push out problems saying, this is a problem for another day. But when
Hmm.
life actually happens, and I'm not saying we're always victims to life, but when serious things happen, like physical injuries or being disabled or life-threatening accidents, those are out of our control. All we can control is our reaction to them. And so the fact that you were able to be resilient, bounce back, and still see the future vision just shows that you do have a great mindset. And that's why I wanted to invite you on and share it today. Thanks for sharing your story, and really appreciate you being on.
Absolutely. And I really thank you, Cannon, for giving me the opportunity. I'm really excited to see where this podcast goes, and I hope you get a lot more listeners and viewers.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Gary, and thanks for all of our viewers and listeners today. We appreciate you being here and investing your own time and your own growth. If today's conversation brought you clarity, motivation, or just a new way of thinking, share it with someone that would appreciate it. And thanks again to Garry Marshall for bringing his story, real experiences, and the deeper meaning behind it all. If you want more conversations like this, more tools for discipline, leadership, subscribe to our channel on YouTube and all the other platforms, and keep leading yourself in the right direction. I'm Kannon Callis, and this has been the Callis Mindset.